it will be very difficult for Keir Starmer to go for her. She will take him on, and she will take on Nigel Farage. She's a street fighter. She absolutely can go up against them.
Highly unpredictable, though.
Highly unpredictable.
Combustible.
But in some ways, that is her shtick, isn't it?
So, Sam, we are back in London after 2 weeks on the road and a couple of other sort of trips in the middle. How are you recovering from conference season?
Oh, I'm not quite back to full form, but getting there. One thing that hasn't changed, it doesn't matter where we've been in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it has rained the whole time. It's raining again today, but we're not going to let that get us down, Lizzie, are we? Because it's been very exciting back in Westminster this week. The Tory leadership contest has finally burst into life.
Yeah, it's been so long and so boring, but the last 2 days, suddenly it got good. Tuesday, I sort of thought, oh gosh, more of this. And then suddenly, fascinating. Do you want to talk us through kind of what's happened?
Well, I'd love to, but I'm really not sure. It's been so confusing. So we had 2 rounds of voting this week. The first was on Tuesday, and I think it wasn't a massive surprise, but James cleverly suddenly leapfrogged into the lead. I think people weren't hugely surprised because at conference he was widely viewed to have had the best party conference turn. He did the big speech on the final day. They all 4 of them gave a speech. His was the one that went down the best. And suddenly his campaign really gained quite a lot of momentum. And on the Tuesday, he went from in the 20s voting-wise to late 30s. So it looked like he was absolutely nailed on to make it through. The second day of voting, however, we all just banked James Cleverly. We all just assumed that James Cleverly was definitely through, and who's going to go out, Kemi or Rob? And I'd sat at my desk, I'd prepped 2 versions ready to go.
Oh no.
And what a fool I was, because it was the third option. James Cleverly crashed out in dramatic fashion. There were gasps all down the press gallery. There were gasps in the room. I'm told in my head office there were gasps around the newsroom. I mean, it really was like a shocking moment. And I think it was a case of classic Tory shenanigans where people start trying to manipulate the voting process to destabilise the person that they fear going up against in the final the most, but it clearly backfired. So somebody said to me that James Cleverly had been absolutely adamant to his supporters, don't be too clever, vote cleverly. But they were too clever by half, this person said to me. That they'd obviously messed it up big style by trying to fix the final 2. And in the process, they eliminated their own candidate.
It's absolutely classic, just Tory mess.
Yeah.
I mean, how did that... the conspiracy theories going round as well about how, how James Cleverly suddenly went straight into the lead, then lost votes again, how Robert Jenrick had been in the lead before that and then suddenly lost votes. Obviously, there was some vote lending going on, but whoever was doing it didn't have control of their numbers. And I've heard so many different theories about whether it's people going rogue, whether it's the different camps trying to sort of, Kemi's camp and Robert Jenrick trying to sort of get the other one off the ballot paper. But, whatever happened, I found it very funny that James Cleverly did have a sort of, he did have a much better speech than the others, and the kind of overwhelming message was, you know what, we need to be more normal. That's how we're going to win the next election. And Tory MP said, no to that.
No way.
No to more normal. So, it's now Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick in the final 2. And we've still got another few weeks, haven't we?
Oh, we've got ages yet. I mean, it's November the 2nd before we get the final results, which means that the new leader will not be responding to the budget. It's a real huge missed opportunity. I know Robert Jenrick desperately wanted to be able to respond if he won the contest. James Cleverly, he was in the same mindset. Kemi Badenoch, I think, is content to let it run its full course. So I think because we have Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch in that final two, it will run its full course now. If it had been James Cleverly and Robert Jenrick, then I think they would have put a lot of pressure on the people
to shorten the contest.
Short. Yeah, but I don't think that will happen now. But, you know, there is going to be a big TV head-to-head. Well, it's actually not head-to-head. This is the thing. So Robert Jenrick's mob say they will debate Kemi Badenoch. He will debate Kemi Badenoch anytime, any place, anywhere.
Classic campaign.
Very, yeah, very, very old school, they'll throwing down the gauntlet. But there is a TV event next Thursday. However, each candidate will have their say. They get 5 minutes each to put their pitch to the nation, and then they'll get questioned by viewers. So it's not a debate. It's not a head-to-head. I really would like to see them challenge each other face-to-face, but I'm not sure one of the camps will agree to that.
I was going to say, there's not a lot of love lost between them either.
No.
So I think that could be quite entertaining. I mean, the other thing to think about as well was during this contest, a lot of people have asked me, what's the good result for the government? Who do they want? Who do they want to win? And when James Cleverly went out yesterday, I immediately got several messages saying, "This is brilliant. The more normal one's gone." They're like, "This is great. This is a great result for us," because Robert Jenrick and Kemi Badenoch are both sort of scrapping in a similar area. They're more to the right of the party than James Cleverly was, and Tom Tugendhat, despite his protestations that he was a right wing, no one really believed him. So I think the government seem quite pleased about that, but obviously they both need to be tested. There's every chance that they perform better than perhaps maybe the government is expecting. I don't know what you think.
I think Kemi Badenoch supporters, their big thing is she is fearless, and it will be very difficult for Keir Starmer to go for her. She will take him on, and she will take on Nigel Farage. She's a street fighter. She absolutely can go up against them.
Highly unpredictable, though.
Highly unpredictable,
combustible.
But in some ways, that is her shtick, isn't it? It's a bit like the Boris Johnson thing, or leaders who actually just defy all the normal political rules. That can be good and bad, as we saw actually with Boris Johnson. It can work in your favour and against you. I think for Robert Jenrick's, from their side, they feel that he is the one who actually will unite the right, and his pitch to take the country out of the European Convention on Human Rights and really tackle migration, they think is a very strong pitch to all those voters they lost who stayed at home last time or went to reform. So it's going to be interesting to see who the membership choose. We're told often that the membership favour Kemi Badenoch. I didn't necessarily see that at party conference. I think James Cleverly definitely did actually do better with the members there. It wasn't as though it was Kemi's show. So it would be interesting to see, but that is the kind of received wisdom that the party grassroots favour Kemi Badenoch. So in many ways, she is now the front runner.
I always think they are quite hard to poll, aren't they? It's quite secretive, the lists, and we don't. So they never give us the full numbers and all of that sort of thing. So I think it is quite tricky, but that's certainly the thing that I've heard a few times. But Robert Jenrick, I think we might have talked about this before, that he definitely wants it a lot, and he was definitely trying very hard at Tory conference. Yeah. So we'll see anyway.
He's very organised. He's very strategic. He has a real plan of what he wants to do. That is clear from the way his campaign has been run. But whether that actually translates to, what the members want is a different thing. We'll see.
So this week we polled our readers on one of the big live issues we've talked about on this podcast before, the winter fuel allowance cut. So we asked, should Labour reinstate the winter fuel allowance for all pensioners? Because obviously they're looking at means testing it, so all but the poorest pensioners will lose the allowance. So a poll just of mirror readers said 57% said yes, it should be reinstated, and 43% said no. Whereas over on the Express, it was 84% said it should be brought back and 16% said no. So sort of a 60-40 split overall. Does that surprise you?
I'm surprised it's not higher among your readers, actually.
Me too.
Yeah, I would have thought. And I'm surprised we even had any who voted against on our side. But I think certainly I know we have had sacks full of letters protesting about this. So I know how angry our readers are about it. I mean, we have had, honestly, so many letters. We've put out pictures actually of how many we've had, and it really shows the strength of feeling. So I'm not hugely surprised by the results. So some of the comments are interesting. So one reader said, Rachel Reeves and Starmer are callous and hopeless. One of the interesting things, though, somebody suggested that the winter fuel payment should be pegged to tax thresholds. So, for example, if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you don't get it. And I think a lot of people actually do feel like that. But actually, the argument is a lot of pensioners are rich and they don't need it. Why should Mick Jagger, for example, get the winter fuel payment? Actually, I've got the figures on it. And so if you did that, if you pegged it to the higher rate tax threshold, about 500,000 pensioners would lose it, which is actually not that huge, really. It would save about 125 million. The Chancellor is trying to save 1.4 billion. So I don't think it just wouldn't generate the kind of money that she's trying to find. But I think people might see that as a fairer way of doing it, that actually, if you are going to reform it, just don't give it to the most wealthy pensioners. And that there's 12 million pensioners, 500,000 on higher rate tax. It's, I think most people would probably think that's actually not a bad way of doing it. But as I say, it's not going to generate the cash that the Chancellor wants. So she's not going to do that.
No, and I think that the issue a lot of people have, and I think you can see that is, I think there is some acceptance that perhaps the very wealthiest don't need to get it, even amongst, sort of left-wing people, people in the labour movement, trade unions have all sort of privately been saying, okay, like, if you've got to save money, we understand that everyone has to sort of be a part of that. But I think a lot of people feel that the threshold is too, that they've chosen is just too, it's too low. It affects too many people who are actually pretty vulnerable, are being caught at that level. And so I guess, the idea would be, could you change the threshold in some way? But the problem is then you don't really save a lot of money.
The money. Yeah.
But there is a broader argument that £1.4 billion, a lot of money, but not in the scheme of government spending. And if Rachel Reeves is trying to fill a £22 billion black hole, there are ways you could raise more money than that.
And it's been, it is absolutely brutal. It's a brutal mechanism, pegging it to pension credit, because, as you say, there's so many people just above that point who were affected, about 2 million people. Age UK this week released their own research that found 80% of people that are on the breadline, so not those who are going to qualify because they're on pension credit, but those who are absolutely still struggling to make ends meet, they will lose this payment. And that, they're warning of potential disastrous consequences this winter as a result. There's a big protest outside Parliament on Monday, and then campaigners went inside Parliament to lobby MPs. I know certainly Silver Voice is one of the groups there. They were very frustrated that Labour MPs didn't turn up. They were very keen to speak to Labour MPs, and they felt that actually they kind of shied away from the issue. But outside, you saw MPs from other parties, and actually you saw the unions. Unite the Union were leading chants of Keir Starmer's cruelty on this issue, which is quite a thing to behold, only 100 days into a Labour government, to see the unions outside calling the Labour Prime Minister cruel. So, it was quite a do.
Yeah, Unite are known for their criticism of Starmer, but also they do have a lot of retired members, which I hadn't realised how many before this sort of began, and so they feel really strongly about this, and I think it continues to be a really difficult issue for the government, and the pressure's only going to get more sort of more intense because the budget is approaching. So October 30th, it's actually not that far off now, where this decision sort of going to be confirmed, and we're entering that period of fevered budget speculation and intense lobbying, which is always a tough thing, I think, for whoever's in the Treasury. You've got to bat everything away and keep some things under your hat. So who knows what will be in it, but I feel that there's a lot of pressure to find a way to either mitigate this through another channel or to soften it. Whether Rachel Reeves decides to do that, I don't know.
I think the problem is mitigation. You just end up essentially spending the same amount of money that you were already spending. So why go through all this pain? You might as well just leave it in place. And I think that's the big problem. Essentially, you either have to reverse this or stick with it. Mitigation doesn't really. You just complicate the system. You create more bureaucracy. You make it harder for people to work out what they're entitled to. If you're going to go down that road, you might as well just keep it in place. But that's a big... that would be such a huge loss of face for the government. I can't see them doing that.
They've taken so much political heat on this that it would be... I think it would be very hard for them to move.
It's been a difficult week for the Prime Minister. Obviously, he lost his Chief of Staff. We don't know whether she was sacked or whether she was resigned. It amounts to the same thing. She is gone. Sue Gray has left the building, although she is still around in a new form. We're not quite sure what this job entails. It's envoy for the nations and regions. It's
Indeed.
A big title. We don't know if it comes with pay. There's a big meeting on Friday of the nations and regions, but we don't know even if Sue Gray will be at it. It's all shrouded in mystery. But anyway, it's been a tricky week for the Prime Minister on that front. He's very keen to kind of reset the government, get on the front foot. So today there is a huge announcement about workers' rights. Do you want to tell us what that includes?
Yeah, so I think, as you say, they're desperately trying to draw a line after a really difficult first few months. And we're just coming up on the 100 days in government. And one of the Labour's big commitments was that they would bring forward their workers' rights reforms within that 100-day period. So you're seeing that this bill, the Employment Rights Bill, which is being tabled in Parliament today, this is was a huge part of Labour's offer. They've been working on this for years. Angela Rayner first announced it in 2021. It's a key part of their kind of relations with unions and business. So the kind of key stuff in there is basically there's 28 measures, but kind of the main things are a default right to flexible working, bereavement leave, day one rights for parental leave, paternity leave, day one sick pay, and an end to exploitative 0 hours contracts, and fire and rehire, as well as a number of other things. So it's really ambitious and is something that's going to have a massive impact on millions of people if they can get it right and they can get it through properly. Because I think there's like 1 million people on 0 hours contracts. There are 9 million people at the moment, the government says, who are sort of within they haven't been in their jobs for 2 years, which is at present the kind of cutoff for when you can sue for unfair dismissals. So there again, that 2-year period is going to be got rid of. So yeah, I think it's the kind of thing that Labour really want to be talking about. This is a huge part of their offer. This is good Labour stuff. The unions like it. It's good for their core vote. It shows that they're trying to do something really different because they are ambitious proposals. But it has been really tricky to reach this point, and there are business concerns about it. So it's going to take a while to kind of get it through and to make sure they get it right. But this is the kind of thing that Keir Starmer wants to be talking about rather than glasses and Taylor Swift tickets.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you say the unions are really pleased about it. I think that's the bit that probably is causing most concern, because if the unions are pleased about it and the business leaders are not, when you're trying to go for growth, it strikes me that actually it's probably a bit too, it's gone a bit too far one way. I think businesses are really struggling, particularly hospitality. The sector has never really recovered from the COVID pandemic. When you then chuck a load of extra burdens on business at a time when they're still struggling, they're still trying to get on the front foot, I think that is a huge, huge risk to take. And if the unions are so pleased with it, it suggests that the government hasn't really factored in the kind of private sector needs as much as possible.
Bad bosses have nothing to fear, do they?
No, bad bosses don't, but small businesses do have a lot to fear from burden.
From red tape.
Yeah. And when you're asking a small firm to take on a member of staff and you don't know... you don't really know how that staff member is going to work out. And so there is a kind of quid pro quo at the moment, isn't there, that actually, you know, if it doesn't really work out in the first couple of weeks, then fine, you know, that you should be able to easily move on from that. And I think businesses will be resistant to taking on staff unless they're absolutely 100% sure that staff member is going to work out. I think there are concerning, probably hidden consequences. So, for example, the maternity rights thing, I think it's really important to support women in the workplace. I'm slightly worried it could backfire because actually the measures in place could discourage employers from taking on women if they have to give them maternity rights from day one. I think that could cause problems for women in their 20s and 30s trying to get on. And there are all these kind of consequences, aren't there, that may not have been properly considered. This has been drawn up in 100 days. And also, I would just say...
But they have been working on it for 3 years.
Yeah.
In consultation with businesses and unions. They've talked about this so many times. There's been so many drafts. I do think you're right that I think that there are unanswered questions. Like when I was looking at the kind of unfair dismissals stuff, we had a briefing about it yesterday, and there were bits that I was like, I don't really understand this, because they're talking about a new statutory probation period that would be about 9 months long, but they're going to consult on it, and what happens in that period, you have a day one right, but also you're in a probation period. I was a bit confused by that, so I think businesses are a bit confused by that too. But there is also I think what businesses want is certainty, right? They want clarity. They want to be able to make decisions. And so the worst thing this could do is put people off hiring because they aren't sure what's going to happen. So the government needs to be aware of that, and I think they are. But there is a broader issue, which the Tories tried to grapple under Rishi Sunak, was productivity there are loads of people who aren't in the workforce, and particularly post-pandemic, loads of people off on long-term sick leave, who perhaps have different needs now to before. How do you get these people back into the labour market? And is there a way, by trying to encourage more flexible working, by trying to make sure that people bring more fathers into scope for paternity leave, is there a way that means you can try and get people back into the workforce?
I think if you're an employer and there is somebody on long-term sick, and then you're being asked to consider them as a employer and you have to give them rights from day one, that's a risky hire, isn't it? That's a risky hire that maybe you might be prepared to give them a chance, but under these new rules, then perhaps you're not as willing to give that person the chance, because you look at their history and you look at the rights that they have from day one. That then becomes like a much bigger deal to make that leap, doesn't it? And I think you have to look at the people who, as you say, they've been working on this for a long time. It's Angela Rayner and Jonathan Reynolds. Now, Angela Rayner is obviously a trade unionist by background. Jonathan Reynolds has spent almost his entire working life in the public sector. So neither of them come at it from a private sector mindset. They are coming at this from the mindset of workers and the public sector. And that is not the same as coming at it from the mindset of a dynamic private sector employer.
But they have been talking to businesses about this for a long time. Businesses have been feeding in, actually parts of it have been watered down because, much to the fury of some of the unions.
They've definitely watered something down.
They originally said they were going to ban 0 hours contracts, now they're not. The probationary thing is not going to come, the unfair dismissal rules are probably not going to come until autumn 2026 because businesses said, hold on a second, this is... So I think they are very much trying to take that on board. I take your point that, yes, Angela Rayner has a trade union background, but I know that, you know, trade unions are sometimes seen as the bad guys, they're the villains. But like, actually, if you're looking at overhauling workers' rights, people who speak for workers are not necessarily always villains in that space.
No, absolutely not. What I'm saying is there has to be a balance. And I know the Federation of Small Businesses has reacted very badly to this today, and we're expecting more reaction throughout the day from some of the leading trade organisations, and they are not particularly happy with the announcements that we've seen, and that does concern me. But there has to be some entrepreneurial mindset, private sector mindset in this process, and I'm not sure that really has come through.
So, Sam, what's your moment of the week?
Well, Boris Johnson is back, and he is apparently unleashed, although nobody ever really thought he was leashed. So, but anyways, book's out. He has been everywhere, telling us the inside track of his time in Downing Street. Obviously entertaining the nation. People either love him or loathe him.
Just like entertaining's pushing it a bit.
But, you know, he brings a bit of much needed colour to this drab and dreary technocratic world we're living in at the moment. So,
oh God, I was listening to him on the radio yesterday. I just thought, oh, this is so triggering. Back in the day, where he was sort of wandering around, sort of saying, oh, you know, Keir Starmer's being greedy by taking all these donations. And I'm not trying to do whataboutery, but I wrote so many stories about the donations that he took to pay for his wedding party, the flat, all of that. So a bit of pot kettle there.
Well, you know, it's
classic
as
Boris.
the Gacy of the nation. Lizzie, what's your moment of the week?
I was just going to pick, on a slightly different note, President Zelensky is meeting the PM today in Downing Street. And I think it's a really important moment. Obviously, we've all been very tied up with kind of the internal wranglings and the politicking of party conferences, but actually it's really crucial that they're going to go and talk about the UK's support for Ukraine and to ensure that that's not sort of being lost in any way. So it'll be interesting it's interesting to see kind of where that goes in the future, but there's ongoing conversations about how the UK can help Ukraine to win the war.
It's good to see the PM standing by Ukraine, carrying on that mantle from his Tory predecessors. So, and it's good to see President Zelensky back. He obviously is somebody who I think everybody in the country has been absolutely wowed by how he has managed to keep his nation going during this terrible time. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next Thursday.
And in the meantime, you can follow us on socials at The Mirror and at The Daily Express.
Bye for now.
Bye.